I want to introduce our first keynote, Jim Nasr, who will be focusing on the blockchain applications in healthcare. Admittedly, for me too, healthcare is not the first thing that comes to mind when one mentions blockchain technologies, but Jim's company, Acoer, is an award-winning technology firm and leading developer of practical, usable, real-time blockchain-enabled software. Everyone, please join me in welcoming Jim to the stage.
Well, morning, everyone. Yeah, glad to see so many folks supporting this event, and the sponsors and everybody. It's funny. I think a number of you guys probably noticed already, but Atlanta really actually has a very rich history when it comes to blockchain. A number of the core developers of Bitcoin were right here, and BitPay. I think somebody mentioned BitPay is Steve Per's company, and so it's funny. We sometimes forget. Particularly when you bundle everything to crypto, we forget that actually there's a good amount of legacy for blockchain in Atlanta. Not enough though. I speak around the world, and many times people don't recognize Atlanta, or they don't correlate Atlanta with blockchain crypto. And I think this is a good start for us to hopefully change it. So I appreciate the invite. My focus really is to kind of talk about practical usage of blockchain. I think it's easy to kind of think everything is about crypto or DeFi or the noise you hear about Bitcoin or Ethereum or things like this. But there's really a lot more to it. One thing I would say, even in spite of the fact that the title of my presentation is Blockchain Applications Healthcare, really there's a bigger concept of what's called distributed ledger technologies. Blockchain is an instance, is an example of DLT. So I will be kind of analogously using blockchain and DLT, but I don't want to confuse it. There's a bigger concept. Okay, so that's kind of me. Just a little bit of background about myself. I've been, a software developer professionally for really my entire career. I've also started and exited businesses, and I'm doing that now with Acoer. It's been about 3+ years full-time building software. We're a product company building software in this healthcare blockchain space. And I've been in the healthcare space for a number of years. I was the chief software architect at the CDC for a couple of years, 2016 and 17. So really my mindset, and hopefully it will be interesting to you guys, is to really kind of have a technologist spin on healthcare, not necessarily healthcare domain experts. So, but I've slept enough Holiday Inn Expresses to be able to play the domain expert, at least for the minute. So Jack and the team did ask me just to kind of give a little bit of a preset on kind of key concepts. So I'm gonna just do a little bit of what I call blocking and tackling, just to reset at least some of the things I'm gonna be talking about later on, because I don't want to just dive in and talk about things like proof of work or staking and things like this without some context. But really, why healthcare? Why does it even matter? Like, why do we care? I think I'm gonna. There's all kinds of reasons. If I was going to use a 5-letter word, it would be COVID, right? But there's so many more reasons. And unfortunately, in the U.S., we are incredibly profligate when it comes to healthcare. 20% of GDP, and by far the worst, least transparent healthcare mechanism, drug pricing, I mean, you name it. There's so many, you could almost, all you gotta do is just type, healthcare on Google, and probably the trending news is gonna be something negative, unfortunately, and I'm really not exaggerating here. And then I'm gonna focus a little bit, and really, ideally as much as I can, on some real use cases, demos, like live demos, I have some videos and things like this. I think that'll be interesting. Okay. If you have questions, just hop in, we're informal here. So, why would you start? Why would you even want to consider blockchain? Again, I'm not going to go into all the technologies, but let's put it this way. It's kind of this distributed. The idea is a distributed database, but it's really a non-optimized database. There are plenty of databases around. There have been plenty of distributed databases around. So why would you want to do it? The idea is, are you going to trust Amazon or Facebook? Is that your trust mechanism? It's good in some ways. Somebody mentioned on the panel, I think Jack and the team mentioned that we're becoming the product. You go to Google, yeah, right, or you go to YouTube, I mean, you are the product, you know that, right? You go to Instagram, like 1,000 ads, you know. So this is an alternative for it. But you have to have a really, really good reason, compelling reason to think about blockchain. And I would say you got to be thinking about a need for computational trust, not just trust. Because you could say, well, look, we have a clearinghouse and we trust them, okay? Or a law firm, or a notary public. That's been around. In the analog world, trust has been around. So we're not like, you know, Satoshi Nakamoto didn't just like invent trust, right? That's been around. This idea of computational trust is about trusting cryptography and computer servers and nodes working independent of each other to agree that, you know, Jim actually is speaking at 10:07 here in Atlanta on November 5th and talking about whatever is on, right? And cryptographically proving it. That's really what we're talking about. So if you don't need to have computational trust, and why wouldn't you need it? Because look, me and my 4 other buddies here, we're going to be exchanging Pokemon cards, right? So I already know these guys. I don't need to have some sophisticated system, right, to exchange cards, and, you know, and I can tell that they got, you know, dollar bills or $10 bills. That's good. There's no reason for blockchain. But how about the rest of the group? I don't know you all, right? Or like, you know, let's say it's outside of this room and all of Atlanta. Now I'm like, well, I don't know these people. I don't trust them, obviously. So that's where this idea of computational trust kind of comes in. So I encourage you to think about it, because it's deeper than just this throwaway, well, we need to have trust. Yeah, well, there's already trust. So sometimes it's actually easier to say, you know what, I'm going to trust Bob, right? Because I know Bob is a good guy. Okay. All right, so yeah, you start with computational trust. What else? There's so much else, to be honest. I mean, every one of these we could spend at least an hour on, and I'm not going to, because I don't have 7 hours, just one slide. But look, I think, and again, I kind of come with the mindset of, let's build this up for real. I'm not an academician, right? I'm not going to be lecturing you guys, you know, in blockchain 101, right? That's not it. We're building software, you know, for real clients. So first thing in my mind is it economically viable? Am I going to be able to answer the so what question? And most of the time, some CEO or CFO or whoever is like, so what? And that's a really darn good question. If I can't make it economically viable, forget about it. Nothing else matters. In a real world, if I'm writing a white paper or if I'm doing academic research, okay, you know, economic viability may not that big a deal. You know, if I have 10 users, okay. If I have an NFT of LeBron dunking and that's quote worth $10,000, I'm okay paying 10% transaction fee to OpenSea, right? Real use case, so $1,000, okay. But in the real world, to go to a client and say, like a healthcare client, we're going to retrieve a patient record and you're going to pay $1,000 just because, you know, we have blockchain to prove that we did what we did ethically, they're like, see ya. Right? So we've got to be really like honest about this. If you don't have economic viability, it's just not going to be practical. And that's like key on my mind. There's all kinds of things about the platform you got to know. Is it public? Is it private? Is it hybrid? You know, it's a layer 1. What kind of services you have? Tokens, you know. Again, we could spend hours on it. So the idea of sustainability is a big thing. Why is it a big thing? Because ESG, this environmental sustainability governance thing, is a big thing now for corporations. Why is it a big thing? Well, frankly, because there's money involved. I mean, I'm just being cold about it, but that's the truth, right? And many times governments are sponsoring and there's pressure. So now they're like, well, is your blockchain sustainable? Like, I've heard that, you know, it takes the energy for all of Argentina to run Bitcoin. Yeah, I mean, that's not exactly true, but it's kind of true, right? So that's important. You got to be thinking about it because, again, you're not going to be able to sell your solution to somebody who's really going to pay for it. You know, if you go in there with a straight face, tell them, you know, you're going to be burning up half of Ireland, you know, to run a day's worth of transactions. Okay, governance. This is one of those tricky things that many people don't really think about until it's too late. Because you build something and, you know, like, oh, I'm on Polkadot or whatever it is. I'm not picking on them, I'm just saying it's some kind of a chain. But then later you realize, actually, Ethereum is a good example. You go in, there's open source, great. Platform is good. There's like a million developers. But then you realize along the way that the developers, the core community, they're having infighting, right? They want to double up or Bitcoin, they want to double up the size of the block. And the purists are, resisting that. And then there's forking. So all of a sudden, all the transactions you've had and the wallets you have, somebody is like, well, we just forked the code, which means that we stop from this moment and we go forward with some other thing. So that's a really big issue. And who's going to govern that? Is it just the developers? Is it a bunch of corporations, with profiteering in mind? Key questions. There's a lot about token. I wrote, my partner and I, my business partner and I, we wrote a token economics class from the University of Georgia, the beginning of 2020. It's literally like a 16-week course on token economics. So we could spend all day talking about it. The takeaway for you guys is this. If you're using a public ledger, such as Bitcoin, Ethereum, Hedera, you name it, there's many of them, Avalanche, tokenization is core to security. That's how you get to this idea of cryptographic trust. It's not like an optional thing. You need it, right? So you need to understand that. Again, I'm going to leave it at that because there's so much else in there. But I would say if you're interested, think security first. That is really its utility. And then thereafter is this idea of value creation attribution. I'm sorry, what is your name? Nick? Yeah, so Nick, he's out there, he's creating content that everybody loves, right? Images. So using a blockchain, we want to attribute value to Nick, right? Cryptographically. The token is useful for that. It's not the only way of doing it, but it's a way. And in community, that's, I think, self-explanatory. You have to have tools and developers and, accelerators and things like this. Otherwise, it's just not really going to be real. Okay, so like blockchain is digital native. If you go, based on what the panel was saying, at best it was created in 2008, right, October 31st. Reality is most of the real blockchains now, like Ethereum, has been around since 2015. So, but is that where the data is living? Like my patient health record, is it living on Hedera or Ethereum? Hell no, right? Where is it living? It's living on, I have WellStar, so it's living on their Epic internal electronic medical record systems, and on multiple systems, and I may have other systems along the way, right? Your financial information is not living on a blockchain. It's living at, Wells Fargo or like Bank of America and many other places. So you got to be really kind of clear about blockchain is a way to help you prove things happening, but not to prove that a piece of data is valid or exists or anything like that. Right? Because the data actually already exists. Like 99.99% of data, unless it's some kind of a pure NFT play that somehow didn't exist and is algorithmically developed, already exists. So where's the data? Like can you get to it? Is it your data? Do you have the right credentials to get to it? Can you trust the data? Can you trust the source? What can you do with it? Can you just read it? Can you move it? All these things you really have to consider before you even think about blockchain, because blockchain isn't going to have your data. You're going to use it to stamp or to prove certain things are happening with your data. Right? Like Nick and I are exchanging. I'm giving him $10 to give me rare Pokemon, right? That's the transaction. Blockchain can prove that. It can't prove that he's got like what the shape of the Pokemon card looks like, right? I have children, obviously. That's why I'm fascinated by Pokemon. Anywho. All right, so most of our work, almost all of our work is focused on public blockchains. In my opinion, it's just my opinion, this is not a religious comment. If we are building blockchain technologies, we think that a public blockchain is worth the effort. Because it is leaderless, there's transparency, the security through tokenization. It's open source largely, but my point is this: if it's not a public blockchain, for many use cases we come across, not everything under the sun, I could do the same thing basically with a private database, right? Far less effort. So in my mind always is the question of well, so what? Like, what am I getting by going down this very inefficient database structure and immutability, which, by the way, sounds great, but it's actually pragmatically very, very hard. When you have immutability and you have code out there, you better get the code right, because you could have all kinds of exposure. So if I'm doing all that, why am I Why am I not thinking about a public ledger? So in my mind, in our minds, there are very few use cases that we play with where we're not thinking public, and the transparency and the decentralization are really core to this idea of why we even bother doing it. So anyway, I've talked about the technology, I've talked about value creation, attribution, and then this culture element, it really is this idea of removing intermediaries. This intermediating, like instead of like, why is Swift charging 3% for every single financial transaction under the sun? That's like a rationale that Ripple uses, right? But then Ripple also has a proprietary blockchain, right? But bottom line though is could we do that with 100 of us as individual nodes working together, as opposed to like having one giant clearinghouse like Swift? A good example actually is some former Uber engineers, I just read about this, and I'm actually surprised it hasn't happened yet, to be honest, are developing a decentralized Uber, right? Okay, hey, I'm the passenger, right? I'm going from ATL to my home, John here, he's a driver. I'm taking the risk. I don't know John. John hasn't maintained his car. He doesn't know if I'm a loony. Why is Uber taking 30%, right? Why not just 3%? And could you do it without having like one giant company? Can we stop creating more Zuckerbergs, right? I mean, seriously. Yeah, I won't go there. I'm probably not his biggest fan, but either way. All right, so to me, blockchain is really plumbing. Analogy I use often is like in 1995 when the internet, was just coming around and I was only 75. At that time, we were talking about like things like SMTP or HTTP, right? That's the protocol that, that's when you get an email, it's using this underlying thing called SMTP, right? Simple Mail Transport Protocol. I think pretty soon that there will be no need for like somebody like a Jim or whoever to come and talk about, quote, blockchain technologies, because it just works, right? It's just like, oh, it's a protocol, it's plumbing. So I think you guys should be fascinated by, are you getting the right kind of hot water? Is it touchless? Is the faucet nice? You get the right water pressure. You got to be focused on the top stuff. Few people like Vitalik, are going to be focused on building the plumbing. Yeah, right? That's really, the interesting stuff is the top layer, is where you have the faucet and things like this. So it's very much, I think the really useful things, and hopefully the healthcare side I'll show you is about the applications you build, this distributed apps, dApps, as opposed to the protocol. Okay, I didn't mention private and hybrid and things like this. It is quite feasible that you could have on the right-hand side public blockchains, right? And private, like AppNets or private, kind of more smaller blockchains that communicate to each other, in a hybrid. And why would you do that? It's because maybe you want to have certain things that don't actually create like a gas fee, because they don't need to. It's interim work, right? So you do it internally on a campus or like a private blockchain, but then you announce the final transaction, like the clearing, on a public ledger. And that's where that loop kind of happens. This is a picture of that. Again, there's 1,001 ways to kill a cat. This is by no means the only way of doing it. It's just an example. Okay, so be careful. Those of you guys watch John Oliver, you might remember a couple of years ago, was doing that be careful thing. So basically, like with the tamper-proof nature of blockchain, if you put garbage in there, if you put references to garbage, well, guess what? Now you have garbage forever, right? So that's why I was mentioning this. Being tamper-proof is, yeah, it could be a blessing and a curse. But you really got to be careful what you put out there, especially if that's references to things that then will now become some kind of a legacy, and transactional legacy. So I didn't mention this already. You got to map real-world things that like are analog, for instance. I give you a very good example. Who here has heard of private keys, like wallets? Yeah, okay. So if you and I'm talking about not like this kind of wallet, though it's somewhere in context, but if you have like cryptocurrency like Bitcoin or Ether or something like this, you would have like some kind of like a physical wallet, like a ledger thing, or a piece of paper even, where you write down a bunch of numbers, or something on your phone, right? That's your wallet. But then this idea of a private key is basically because now you don't have Amazon to recover your key, right? or Jim or whoever. The idea is, well, it's your wallet, so you got to look after it. So you have this idea of a private key. So that private key basically allows you to unlock whatever's inside the wallet, right? But all that stuff is like native to blockchain. But the stuff that you put in it, right? Like the you could have, for instance, somebody mentioned a little bit on the panel before this idea of using blockchain for identity. Well, look, does blockchain already provide your identity? I mean, the answer is, of course not. It doesn't. So somebody, some third party or government or yourself, you can create what's called a self-sovereign identity. But those things don't actually exist. So they're real world things, like my healthcare record, but it doesn't actually exist. And you have to somehow figure out how you map it from the physical and analog to the digital and the blockchain. And then, oh, by the way, what happens if you lose your key or forget your passcode or catchphrase? Is there a custodian, like a lawyer, as an example, they could go to and say, hey, look, I really am Jim Nasr. Trust me. Because you can't, like, all of a sudden, just because you forgot or like you upgraded your iPhone from 13 to 14 and you lost your wallet, that doesn't, it's unacceptable to say you have just disappeared as a human being. But that could literally happen. It sounds far-fetched, but really it isn't. So there's a big thing around this. You can have transparency with blockchain, but the more you reveal and the more public information you have, which is useful, the more privacy, you're kind of tilting the balance between revealing privacy and certainly, look, all of the big firms, Google, Meta, all these guys have an army of data scientists and loads of AI algorithms and quantum computers coming. So this idea of reverse engineering public information is a really thing. It's a real thing. So the more you reveal, the more likely you're compromising your privacy. So something to keep in mind. I mentioned all the data really is outside. So this idea of proof of concept versus practicality, I think I talked about the cost, but it's really an important thing because just because you can do it as a proof of concept for 7 users, it doesn't mean it's going to work. Not in the real world. In the real world, you really have to consider things like, is it fast enough? Can you abstract it? Is it cheap enough? Things like that. The guys had a slide about, we're going from Web 1 to 2 to 3, and we're moving to Web 3, and obviously the prefix to this event, is Web 3. Look, in the reality of building software in this space, Web 3 is a transition for like 99.999% of cases, maybe with the exception of things like NFT portfolios, right? So it's lovely to have this idea of like, you're decentralized, you're valuing the content creator, you own your own identity, it's great. But what is that right now? And right now, it's nothing like that. And honestly, like I'm going to take healthcare, it'll take a hell of a long time before it gets there, like decades, right? So you got to think, and those of you guys, I think, are all like young and entrepreneurs, you got to think, how do I help the world transition? Because you're not going to just like land. I mean, like, you're not going to be Sam Beckett and quantum leap, into it. There's a process. So I think that's the real world transition you have to keep in mind. Okay, so why healthcare? Look, I already mentioned this. We should look like the guy on the left. We look like the guy on the right. This is Warren Buffett. There are so many ways of putting this. I mean, I think COVID says it all in terms of human impact, but economically, it is a hungry tapeworm. There's so many other ways of putting it. So we're into data. I'm into data. That's the work that we do. There's this thing which has actually been around for like 50 years. So it's not my thing at all. It's called Eroom's law. It's a literal reverse spelling of Moore, right? That's clever. But you look at that blue line, right? The blue line is what's happening in R&D in pharma. So since the last 70 years, they're spending more and more, it's taking longer and longer, and less efficacy. Moore's law is the red line, which is what we know, right? Everybody knows Moore's law, right? We're all, Georgia Tech. You should, and if you don't admit it. Like, this is not. There's probably some camera they're gonna like zap you out. So yeah, Moore's law. Pretty much every industry relies on Moore's law to get return on investment, right? That's how you get leverage, capital leverage. It's like completely backwards when it comes to R&D in pharma and the healthcare industry. So I'm just going to leave it at that. But the opportunity, though, to me is this: if you look at the right-hand side, that if you tap into, and hopefully all you guys are into this, mobile, IoT, wearables, DLT, distributed ledger technologies, machine learning, these kind of up-and-coming technologies, you can help, not correct it, but you can help trend this towards the right direction. And I think that's what I look at. That's what keeps me interested. So look, like Rockwell says, I always feel like somebody's watching me. So basically, there's this thing. It's called the Hawthorne effect. It's not my thing. It exists. When you know you're being watched, you typically are a good actor, right? So we use that. It's a psychological thing. So if Nick knows that there's a camera and everything he does, we're watching. Nick's like, I'm never going to sit in front row again. But like, if you know that, you're unlikely to give me the finger. At least, maybe when I turn my face. But so that is a concept, all joking aside, you can definitely use to impute more authenticity, to impute compliance, to help healthcare. Because if people know that every freaking transaction is being recorded on some immutable ledger, and 5 years from now, somebody can say, whoa, hold on a second, what is this crap? That, I think there's a psychological impact to help us become better actors. Now, don't get me wrong, that's not the only thing. You have to incentivize people too. As humans, we're really bad at changing our behavior, right? So you have to, there's more than just technology, but I think the Hawthorne effect is something that certainly I believe in. Okay, so more interesting things. This is the real stuff from the trenches, notable use cases in healthcare. There's a lot of them, but here's what I would say. There's a lot of intimation of use cases, but very few actual production quality implementations, right? So that's the truth of it, and I'm going to show you some real things, but patient health record access for sure. This is one that's been around for some time and gets into tokenization, helping incentivize people, to kind of, hop on and download their health record and things like this. Clinical research, definitely an area we're into. I work with the IEEE, which is the standards body, and on decentralized clinical trials, and using blockchain to help researchers and to connect patients to researchers, as opposed to patients to like a giant, kind of like an Ascension Health and Google, who really profiteer from, the 50 million patient records, to researchers, which makes it expensive and bloated for everyone and does not value, like Jim's health record. It values, Google's ability to be able to mine data, right? But that's the Web3 model. Hopefully the transition is actually no. If I have a rare liver cancer, and I'm going to help you in what's called orphan drug development, novel drug development, why should Google get the money? That makes no sense, right? The data's coming from me. Like, I'm the one going to these clinical trials and providing consent all day long. I should get a piece of that, right? That's the basic idea. And then clinical, and luckily there's some clinical researchers and like some DAOs. You guys anybody aware of DAOs? Sorry. Yeah, the decentralized autonomous organizations. Basically, it's an LLC with the rules of the business more or less codified as smart contract. I'm simplifying and dumbing it down. And there's tokens, like so-called governance tokens, that allow you to, kind of know who's doing what, when, where, right? Okay, health data visualization. This is, we've done this work. My company was, I believe, the second public COVID tracker after Johns Hopkins back in early 2020, and the only one using blockchain to authenticate, or rather to make sure that the data was authenticated and was authenticity to it. But there's lots of data visualization. I'm going to show you a couple of examples if I don't run out of time. This classic supply called track and trace. I think that's like everybody kind of thinks of healthcare and track and trace. You have drug moving from, the manufacturer, the kitchen, to the warehouse, to the lorries, and so on. You can track things with a QR code and stuff like that, and then stamp it on a blockchain. Public health reporting. I do have a really good example of this around substance abuse and mortality for substance abuse. I'm going to show that if I don't run out of time. And then one thing I really like, I mentioned at some point that the healthcare market in the U.S. is highly opaque. There's really almost no transparency. I give you a real example. I want to get an MRI because I have a torn, ligament problem, or I have a ligament problem in my hamstring. I call my insurance company. They're like, well, it's going to be $1,000 for an MRI. I'm like, that's crazy. So, because I know MRIs are they aren't. It's not like you're going to McDonald's and there's 1,000 people queuing up, right? A lot of these machines are under capacity. But how do I know what the actual price is or where the price is? Almost impossible. You can, by the way, there's like in all of Atlanta with 7 million people here, there's literally one like little company in Gwinnett that provides provides clear pricing for MRIs. I kid you not. I mean, it sounds insane, but it really is true. So people are working around this as well. Okay, so I'm going to demo this. I think it's better than just talking about it. I've already kind of mentioned it. This is like work we have actually done, and all of these are actually production applications with blockchain in there. I'm going to hopefully demo a couple of this real quick if I don't run out of time. So I did mention back in the day in the blocking and tackling this idea of like there's more than computational trust and what do you consider. So we use this layer 1 public network and blockchain technology called Hedera. Right, so these are the reasons why we use it. I'm not suggesting that's the only option. It's what we use, but it's economically very viable. Its pricing is based on U.S. dollars. So like a transaction, as an example, a retransaction is 1/10 of a cent or something like that, as opposed to like one fraction of an ether that could be up and down, depending on what's going on with the market. Because as a guy building software, if I go to somebody and say, hey, look, here's my software, and our cost could be anywhere from $1,000 to $11,000 every month, depending on what the ether cost is. They're like, are you joking? I mean, how am I going to budget? Basically, some wild, estimate on what the cost is. That makes no sense, right? So having stable pricing, having cheap pricing, and then be able to drive like lots and lots of transaction is very much part of our thinking. And that's why, one of the reasons why we do it. Performance, and you'll see this, for real. Basically, you get the finality of transaction in 3 to 5 seconds, as opposed to several hours of Bitcoin or 10 minutes with Ether. The Ether 2 with the, layer 2 can make that a lot faster. So that's really, really important. And then running many, basically 1,000+ transactions per second. Because the kind of technologies we're trying to build are really millions of transactions per month, tens of millions per month. So it's got to be fast. It's got to be like a real-time system. And also, honestly, the way we build software, we put the blockchain as an underlayer. We don't want you to be worried about or even focus on, well, here's my blockchain is telling me something. No, because it's supposed to be plumbing. The pipes in your kitchen don't like send you signals saying the water is flowing, right? You open your faucet. You use the application. You don't dig the tiles to see what's going on with the pipes. So I think I talked about the platform. There's a lot of things that you can do there, token services and so on. It is the most sustainable blockchain known to man, as far as I know. And there's, again, don't take my word for it. There are studies here. You can see, if my mouse works here, you can see where this is. So University College of London did an expansive study on this, and you can see, as example, this here, Ethereum is a very, very large line where they had to, the scale is actually off the scale. And then the governance for Hedera, and that's why one of the reasons why we like it is that there are a lot of big companies like Google, IBM, Boeing, and so on, who are like 27 of them now, who are basically governing this. And these are big companies, have their own reputations. It's not like some random Joe or Jim or somebody, some development team in Belarus, right? It's companies that have been around for a long time. So therefore, they are risking their reputation by putting their name here. So we think having that gives us, because we're building for a long term, gives us an opportunity to basically build on something that we think is going to be around for a while. And the management team is seasoned and so on. Okay, so this is a real example. We're tracking substance abuse, mortality, do people dying due to fentanyl and heroin and things like this. I'm going to hopefully have a chance to show this to you live. I'm cognizant I'm running out of time. Here's another application. It's one of our clients called Health Ready. They're basically incentivizing patients and researchers to connect and to do drug development. The video works. Is the audio working?
HealthReady is designed to be a safe, secure, easy access place to store your healthcare data on your terms. To get started, simply download the app, link your current patient records with your provider, and gain immediate access to your records whenever you need them. HealthReady, your health data at your control.
So you can go to the Apple Store or Google Play and download the app if you want to. It's called Get Help Ready. But what they're doing here, not to get into all of it, is essentially they're enabling patients and clinical researchers to connect for orphan drug development. And orphan drug development basically means novel drug development for rare diseases, and like right now what we're working with them is around rare liver cancer, as an example. So empower patients, establish computational trust, prove authenticity of transactions, incentivize patients, so on. Here's just a little screenshot. I'm going to do a little video walkthrough. Oh, just one quick thing here. You see on the bottom of this, with the screenshots, we have the blockchain, and it's really very much intentionally that way. We don't bring blockchain into the surface. It's just below the scenes. But our client knows what's going on. We're stamping data. We're using NFTs, non-fungible tokens, to prove consent, that the patient consented to be on the app, consented to be possibly involved in a clinical trial, and so on. I'm not going to get into the architecture. All to say that what we have here is we have patients using the app, we have clinical researchers using a mobile, rather a portal, and then we have providers going through an API. That's the basic idea. We have blockchain behind the scenes. All right, so I have 2 minutes, so I need to be very fast. So this is just a little video. I'm not going to probably go through all this, but you can kind of see there's this idea that you can earn some tokens, and then the tokens are, none of our patients really care about, quote, tokens. They care about US dollars. So we do the swapping in the liquidity pool to go from the token, the native token, to US dollars, because it means nothing to say you're getting a HealthReady token. Right? You can kind of see, you can look for clinical trials, and you can, we basically surface all of the clinical trials in the US through this app, very easy to find. You have a profile and things like this, and you can get rewards. I won't go through all of this because I think it's self-explanatory. And then this is the last bit that we've done, is just around token economics. You can kind of see there's multiple areas where we can do like rewards. If you participate, if you have trial participation, if you request to participate, every one of those allows you to get some native tokens, and then those tokens are manifested US dollars to you. That's the basic idea. All right, I'm going to stop there. I do want to show you real quick. It's not fun showing all these things without thinking it's just PowerPoint slides. So if you're interested in, this is our webpage. You can kind of go and have a look. There's a lot of things here that are live. So as example, actually let me go to, because we use cookies here. So we run, every ledger has, if I can make this a little bit bigger, it's just, my mouse is not cooperating. You can kind of see this refreshing. Every ledger has this idea of an index. Like for Ethereum, it's called ETHScan. It shows you all the transactions. This is what we're doing for Hedera. We're one of 2 mirror nodes there. So you can kind of see what's happening. And I talked about this idea of finality of transactions in seconds. So you can see these transactions are literally happening as we speak. You can go and look at it if you're interested in that. There's a whole thing in there. And then we also do a lot around, like I mentioned, dashboards. So you can find it from our homepage. Just go down, you can click on it. But real quick, as an example, if you're, so this is, in the US, there's this thing called the Daily Med, or the Daily Med database. As an example, let's say we're looking for, flu. It's flu season. You can kind of see right now, just very quickly, that there's 1,300 flu drugs, and this is updated. I can kind of see what's going on, and then look at actually what are the drugs, and if I wanted to see this one in particular, I just go to the government site. But the thing that I want to show you that's interesting here is that we actually, every time we update the database, we proof it on Hedera. So as example, this is, again, going back to our Explorer. You can kind of see this transaction. Let's get into all of the details. When it was done, and who were, encrypted payload of the transaction, the amount of money that was spent. All of this is transparent. Do you have to click on this to take our word for it? No, because experience doesn't require you to know anything about blockchain. But if you want to say, hey, look, tell me, prove to me this is real, we have public transparency. And the public transparency, we're careful about this idea of balance between utility, useful information, versus divulging private information that shouldn't be out there. All right, I have run out of time. I do apologize, but I have lots of demos I can show you for real if you're interested. I appreciate your time.